Hello, Tennessee history. Hope you're doing well. Hope you had a good week last week and a good weekend. Remember, last week we finished on our lesson talking about how Tennessee rejoined the United States of America. Remember, they were a part of the Confederate States of America during the Civil War, and now, after the Civil War, during Reconstruction, they were trying to become a part of the United States of America again. And in July 1866, they rejoined the United States of America. What a celebration being a part of the United States again after, being away from it and going through all the processes of trying to be a part of it again. So, well, after that happened, President Andrew Johnson, who was from Tennessee and had political positions in Tennessee, really supported Tennessee. He was president of He was president of the United States at the moment. And remember, he took the place of Abraham Lincoln. He was his vice president, and after Abraham Lincoln got shot, Andrew Johnson became the next president. Well, he was having difficulties with Congress. They were not getting along. You ever had someone that doesn't get along with you, or you don't get along with them? It can be a very difficult time. And so they were not seeing eye to eye with different laws and everything, and they were going back and forth. Well, Andrew Johnson ended up being impeached by the House of Representatives. And so they impeached him. And so then, and what impeachment is trying to remove a political figure, like a person, whether it's president, whether it's a member of the House, whether it's a member of the Senate, any political figure, trying to remove them from office. And before I go on, remember, you want to make sure you're taking notes on these. You will use these notes for your homework or your work for this week. So just make sure you're taking notes, and you can use those notes for assistance on your work. All right, so he was impeached by the House of Representatives, and then it was brought before the Senate, the highest level in Congress. And so the Senate, they made a vote, and he was one vote shy from being impeached. One vote shy. So President Andrew Johnson remained president, but it was a very difficult presidency, and no one really supported him or really liked the things that he did. So he had a tough time campaign or during time during his presidency. Well, back specifically in Tennessee, remember Governor William Brownlow? He was that governor that that no one really liked, especially he didn't like those that had supported the Confederacy, and so he made it life very difficult for them in Tennessee. He was not a very fair governor. He was one-sided, and he ruled really like a dictator, like a king. And so, well, he ended up winning the election of 1867, and as a result, Tennessee continued to not do well with his treatment. It just continued to go worse and worse. The people that supported the Confederacy just did things that made things in the state not very. It did not go well in the state. It did not go well for Brownlow. And on February 25th, 1869, William Brownlow decided to quit being governor. And then DeWitt Center became the next governor of Tennessee. He was the governor. DeWitt Center was the governor after William Brownlow. Governor Center gave every male the right to vote. So remember, under William Brownlow, those who supported the Confederacy, who had fought for them, could not vote. They did not have other rights as people that supported the Union. And so Governor Center, one thing he did was he gave every male the right to vote. And so there was no, well, if you supported the Confederacy, you can't do this. It was more even, the way it should be. And so every male had the right to vote. But not only that, in Tennessee and the rest of the United States, those who had been slaves were now free. They were free. Imagine if you couldn't do something for your whole life and then you had the chance to do it, or you were able to do it. How exciting the slaves that were working hours and jobs that they didn't want to work. They couldn't escape. And now they could escape. They were free. They were free at last. And so how awesome is that they had freedom? Well, former slaves were given the chance to go to school and to be educated. The first night school for freed slaves was opened in Knoxville, Tennessee. So in East Tennessee, in the city of Knoxville. It was founded by Laura Ann Kanzler. So she's the one that founded the night school, Laura Ann Kanzler. She also taught freed slaves how to read and write. So slaves, they didn't have the opportunity to go to school while they were being slaves. They were working in the fields or doing other tasks. And so once they were freed, they had the opportunity to learn how to read and write, learn how to do math, learn about, what has happened in history before their time and other things as well. And so they had the opportunity to get an education in order to get different jobs later down on the road. So, in 1866, Fisk University was founded in Nashville, and that became a college primarily for African Americans. I mean, anybody could go to it, but at this time, there were certain schools that were not allowing African Americans, who'd just been slaves, to go to their college, or they didn't have the money. And so Fisk University became a college in Nashville, Tennessee, and it's still there today. Education for African Americans began to grow and spread in Tennessee. And not only this, they began to take positions in political office. How about that? We have people that couldn't go anywhere. They had to do only what the master told them to do. Maybe the only place they could go to church, and some of them couldn't even go there. And now that they're free, they are getting jobs, they are getting educated, and now some of them are becoming, politicians. They're able to become in Congress. They're able to have other political positions. How awesome is that? That was going on. Well, Mary Church Terrell from Memphis and Ida B. Wells, who lived in Memphis, both were influential in standing up for the rights of African Americans. They worked together, or worked, with people, and were able to help, try to get more rights for African Americans. Because now that these slaves were free, there were laws and different things that were saying, well, you may be free, but you still can't do these things. So it still made it hard for African Americans now that they were free. But it was a lot better than being under slavery. But Ida B. Wells, Mary Church Terrell, helped get African Americans rights, helped stand up so that they could have more rights. So that is the end of Reconstruction. We just talked about the end of Reconstruction. Now we are going to talk about the end of the century, the end of the 19th century in Tennessee. One important event that happened during that time was an election for governor. And this was no ordinary election. I don't know if this has ever happened in the U.S. or even in Tennessee. I'm not sure, but I doubt it did. In Tennessee, during this time, there was two brothers that were running for governor in the election of 1886. There was one candidate named Alfred Taylor. He was the one that was running for the Republican Party. And he was, presented and nominated, and he was nominated in hopes that the Democrats, the Democratic Party, would not, nominate his brother. Well, that plan did not fall the way they wanted to. It fell through, and the Democratic candidate in the election of 1886 for Tennessee was Robert Taylor. Bob. He went by Bob. And so we have two brothers, Alfred Taylor and Bob Taylor. They are both running for, governor in Tennessee. They had 41 debates. They had 41 debates all across the state where they would, discuss political issues, and they would, battle each other. That's very interesting how these two brothers, played, when they were little, probably played games together. May have, they got in arguments, or they had, maybe they, wrestled with one another, beat each other up, whatever. And now they're both running for governor against each other. So how interesting is that? So, well, each brother had a rose for the logo, or on them, as they would debate, and how they would run their campaign, running for governor. And Bob had a white rose, and Alfred had a red rose, and it became known as the War of the Roses because they both had the rose. And so, well, thousands of people came to see and hear them speak. Thousands of people. I mean, very rarely does this happen. I don't even know, like I said, if it's ever happened. Well, after the debates, both brothers played a violin or a fiddle. And so they would, after their debate, after they're, discussing political issues together and saying, you're wrong, or, Mr. Taylor, you're wrong, it would be like, they're brothers again. They would, get the violin and, just go and really have like a little concert. And so people really loved that. They loved it. They were brothers, going against each other. But then they were brothers that came together really to play violins afterwards. And so one funny story is about the election was that Bob Taylor found one of his brother's speeches, and he used it. Bob had the opportunity to go first at a specific event, and they were both going to speak, and Bob spoke first. And then it's like, what does Alfred say now that Bob has taken his speech? So Bob Taylor took Alfred's speech. So, Bob would later win the election, and he would become a great governor. So Bob Taylor, for the Democrats, would win the governorship of 1886 in Tennessee. And then Alfred, he would become the governor later in Tennessee in 1921. So they both got to become governors. So, but that was really interesting to see and learn about that. So, sharecropping took place in Tennessee during this time, and sharecroppers were persons who did not own the land they farmed. So they did not own the land. They would farm the land, and they would give a percentage of what they grew to the person that owned the land, and then, they would make some money as well. Well, the people that would do these were poor people that didn't have a lot of money, and they would, use credit, and they would they would use that credit to buy tools and stuff to work in the fields and on the farms. And because they were using that, they had to pay the people that they bought the tools from, and then they had to pay the person that owned the field. They did do the work, but the person owned the plot. And so these sharecroppers really just made enough to live on. They really didn't make very much money. And so it was very tough for the sharecroppers. As Tennessee was getting to the end of the century, new prisons were built. The prisoners, even though they are prisoners, they were not treated quite well. They had bad structures, buildings and living conditions. And so new prisons were built, and education in Tennessee began to grow. There became more opportunities for people to go to school, both white and black and other races. And so Tennessee began to grow slowly but surely as it approached the end of the century. Well, one other important event in Tennessee history near the end of the century was the fight for women's rights. At this time, males had tons of rights, had the majority of rights, and women did not have as many rights as men. They could not vote, they could not do a few other things, and so women began to step up and lead for more rights and have an influence so they could do things like vote and other things. Well, one of these leaders was Elizabeth Avery Merriweather. She was a woman from West Tennessee who fought for women's rights in Tennessee. She got equal pay for equal work passed in Tennessee, but it was not enforced. So equal pay, you get the same pay, you get paid the same as a man, for the same amount of work. That's fair. And so, but even though it was passed, a lot of people enforced it. No one was really saying, "Well, you need to follow this." So it did get passed, but no one was really paying attention to it. Other women, such as Napoleon Cromwell, Elizabeth Saxon, also spoke and fought for women's rights. Lyde Meriwether, Lide, Lyde Meriwether, she also was a significant leader for the women's rights in Tennessee. She was Elizabeth's sister-in-law. And so what she did, she started the women's suffrage organization. And suffrage is not meaning suffering. It's really trying to get the right to vote and other rights for women. And so she started that organization in 1899 in Memphis. She organized different women's groups to seek support for women's rights. So she was trying to get more support, get a more buildup, a better, larger group of women, so that they could help her, and that as a result, the women would be able to get more rights. Meriwether even brought in Susan B. Anthony, who was a very national public leader for women's rights. She also got Carrie Chapman. And so she would bring those women into Tennessee. They would speak and I'll be able to help influence, women to stand up for getting more rights. Well, in 1897, the first Women's Rights Convention was held in Nashville. So before it was just Meriwether was having groups or meetings with women, but this was in the actual whole state. This was to represent for the whole state. 1897, the Women's Rights Convention was held in Nashville. Women's rights in Tennessee, however, would not happen until later. So even though they did have the Women's Rights Convention, nothing came of it. Those in office, political office, did not grant them more rights at this time. And so in Tennessee and America, it would not happen until later into the 20th century. But the work that these ladies and women did, it would open the door and it brought the rights of women closer. And so that is really just how the end of the century comes to a close for Tennessee. For this week in Tennessee history, your work is, number one, you will match people and terms that we have just gone over. You will match those together. So, you'll have the terms in a word bank, the people and terms in a word bank. You'll have a description. You will try to match those with the correct description. So that's what you will do for one assignment. Another assignment is, because it's the end of a century, not only that, Tennessee would celebrate its 100th year anniversary as becoming a state. They had become a state in 1797, and so now they are going to celebrate the 100th year anniversary of becoming a state. How awesome is that? They have become a state for 100 years. They have gone through a whole bunch, even a civil war, and they are still around. They rejoined the Union. And so I have an article. I'll have that link, for that assignment. You'll copy the link and read that article. It's not very long. You'll read that article about the 100th year anniversary of Tennessee becoming a state in celebration of that. And then you answer questions. In fact, you can have the questions with you as you are reading the article. And so you're able, when you see, that you got the question, and then when you come across that area, you can go ahead and answer it right then. You can either type it, you can print it out and write it. You can write it down on a sheet of paper, and then do it that way, whatever it is. So whatever way you want to do it. So, but those are your 2 assignments this week. You'll have the matching people and terms from what we have just talked about, and then you will read an article and answer questions about the 100th year anniversary of Tennessee becoming a state. Remember, if you have any questions, you can always call or text me. I'll be available. And remember to submit those by Friday at 5 o'clock. Friday at 5 o'clock. But I hope you have a good week and enjoy learning more about Tennessee history.